All right, good morning. Good morning. And I hope that everybody can hear me. Okay. Looks like we have a viewer. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining Royal We Fellowship. And I'm going to go ahead and open up in prayer. Our Father, who are in heaven, how holy is your name. And your kingdom will come, and your will shall be done here on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us of our sins as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, and deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. And everybody says, Amen. All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to jump right into it because this is how we go on Royal We Fellowship. Now, to bring you up to date, last week we did talk about Genesis 4, chapter 4, verse 12. We see that Cain had killed his brother Abel out of a narcissistic fit of rage, narcissistic jealousy, narcissistic envy. And we also see the punishment as a result of Cain killing his brother Abel, the punishment that was passed down to Cain. And we see that this is the punishment that is meant to be passed down to narcissism in general. And I did my best to upload a video on the Organic Royal We channel this past week talking about the consequences of narcissism or the curse. And this is where I got this from for that video. The punishment was that nothing would grow for Cain in that land. And what that means is that he was banished from that relationship, banished from that area. It doesn't mean that Cain would not go on and be fruitful and multiply, because we're going to find out that he does, which means that Cain did go on and eat. He was able to go on and produce fruit, but not in that area. Do you follow me? He was able to go on and live a life and have wives and have kids, but not where him and his brother Abel once stood together. Nothing he would do in that area, in that dynamic, in that family setting, in that relationship would grow anything. And this is part of the punishment, and this is important for you and I to understand this. When we talk about the curse or the consequences of narcissism, there's an automatic punishment that happens, in that they have damaged the soil, they have destroyed you, they literally have killed you with their words. And I talked a little bit about this last week. When they kill you with words, it is like a death, and nothing they can plant into you will grow. That's part of the curse. It's part of the consequence, and there is nothing that can change that. So even if they humble down, even if they apologize, they've already destroyed a piece of your soil and your foundation to the extent that nothing good will grow. And that can be represented by the lack of trust. It can be represented by all sorts of things, but nothing is going to grow in that relationship. That's part of the curse of narcissism. The second curse we see is that Cain was then destined to be a wanderer, not just a wanderer, but also a fugitive. A fugitive. All right. So we see that there's a restlessness that Cain lived with. He was a fugitive, and this is also part of the curse of narcissism. The curse that follows narcissistic rage is this wandering, fugitive type lifestyle. This is why narcissists go from relationship to relationship, constantly trying to make the appearance that they're looking good on the outside to everybody else, but on the inside, they're constantly running. Who are they running from? They're running from themselves. And the problem is wherever you go, there you are. And so this is why the abuse comes out again, as though everybody has caught up to them, and then they play the victim. And this is why when you hold narcissists accountable, as we've discovered, they play the victim. It's as if everybody is attacking them all at once, when it's just you, right? It's everybody in their life finally catching up to them, saying, you are a horrible person. You've caused all this damage. And in this, they react as though they are being surrounded, and they are being they're being surrounded and overthrown. This is the narcissist mentality of victimhood. This is them being surrounded and unable to take the accountability because it's too much. It's overbearing, because you holding them accountable represents everything wrong that they've done that they have never accepted accountability for. So now that we understand that, we're going to take off today And we're going to follow the line of Cain, and we're also going to see what happens with Adam and Eve and their children a little bit. Now, uh, we see that Cain did move on. In fact, as we said, nothing flourished where he was, where had killed his brother Abel, but he did leave. He did have family. We see this briefly in Genesis 4, after verse 12, all the way up to 4, verse 22. We finally come across Lamech. Lamech is a descendant of Cain. And very little is known about the descendants of Cain, except for what we hear with Lamech here. He indicated in Genesis 4:22 that he had slain a man for wounding him and a young man for hurting him. He was addressing his wives. All right. He proceeded to extend from that the protection that was offered to Cain. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, then truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold. So I gathered this idea and this understanding here that when we talk about narcissism, when they inflict pain, they live with this certain understanding that they're not going to be killed off for what they've done. They're going to be that there will be a heavier punishment for those who are trying to kill toxic, abusive narcissists. And this is what is described as being avenged 70 and sevenfold. So they already know, and this is an interesting concept for you to understand, but narcissists do hold other people to higher standards, even though what we look at narcissism as being the epitome of thinking they're greater than everybody else. One of the things that we also see at the same time is that they look at others who truly are greater as being held to such a higher standard that they almost live this life saying, you cannot touch me because you're at such a higher standard than I am spiritually, morally. And if you do, your punishment will be far more severe. And in reality, there's an accuracy to this. How many of you are aware, especially those of you right now watching Royal We Fellowship, you are held to a higher standard. You are held to a higher moral ground. You have a responsibility to yourself and as a Royal We community and to your Heavenly Father not to stoop down to the depths of destruction and hateful rage as we see narcissists and as we see evilness in this world. In other words, when you identify that you're in the playing field of this evil, you need to get out of that field because it's not yours. And the longer you play in this field, yes, the punishment on you will be sevenfold. And I believe this is a message from God. And why is this? It's because you knew better. You know better than to play with that evil. You know better than to allow that anger to manifest itself. You know better. You're not chosen for that. You are going against your destined path, right? Again, this is what God was trying to get Cain to understand early on when Cain was contemplating the hatred in his heart towards his brother Abel. God said, if you do not do good, or if you do good, will you not be rewarded? See, Cain was failing to understand that he was to be his brother's keeper, the highest of positions, where all Cain saw is my brother had his sacrifice received, which was the lamb, the firstlings of the flock, right? And Cain saw that his vegetables and produce were not received by God, and he was all envious over that. But God was trying to shake into Cain, saying, you don't get this, man. You don't get this. You are above your brother Abel. You are his keeper. You have the ultimate position if you will snap out of it. It's not about the flock, the firstlings of the flock. It's not about the vegetables. It's about you rising to understand who you are. And if you miss this, how terrible of a fall, right? And that's what he's trying to give him to understand. And so the message to us in this also, as both the punishment and Lamech indicated, is that you are also held to the standard. You know better. You are on the higher ground. And even though you're filled with anger coming out of toxic relationships, it's God wanting to shake you, saying, you know better than to be involved with these people. You know better than to engage in this type of lifestyle. Okay? Know your higher calling. Know your higher power. Know who you are. Stop playing in that and do not seek revenge. Okay? Because it will be avenged sevenfold. And it's like joining the dark side for those of you who caught the last night's video upload. Now we're going to get into some really wild things for the last portion of this message. We are going to skip all the way down, we see generations being fulfilled through both Cain, and then also we see that, I don't want to miss this, we see that Adam and Eve had another child, Seth, and Seth was named because God had appointed another child instead of Abel. Okay, now it's important to understand that the word is used is indicated that uh, Seth was a child instead of Abel. It does not mean that Seth was their only child after Abel. It meant that Seth was the child instead of Abel. In other words, the child to take the place of Abel's position. Seth would be the line that we now follow from this point in time all the way down through his descendants till we get to Noah, and then from Noah all the way to Abraham, and then all the way to us. So we are all descendants. A lot of people say we are descendants of Adam and Eve as the first ones, right? But in reality, we are, but also we are more specifically descendants through Seth. All right. Now then, I mean, ideally, that's what we want. We don't want to be descendants of Cain, even though there's a lot of that mixed in there, but this gets into a lot of weird stuff that we'll touch on later. But the morality and the holiness is now coming down through the line of Seth instead of Abel. So again, Seth was possibly not the only child after Abel and after Cain, but Seth was the child instead of Abel. It's important to note that this word makes a difference. So Seth was the child that God appointed instead of Abel. Now, we follow the line of Seth all the way down, and we see that through the line of Seth, we get to a list of names that it significantly has some sort of impact. We see that we go all the way down to Enoch. Now, there's a lot of controversy surrounding the name of Enoch. Enoch is a descendant of Seth. Enoch, what we know of Enoch is that, and again, possibly the most controversial contributor of what's known as the non-canon endorsed extra biblical matter. You know, you have the tablets that were found or whatever in the seas, the what's it called, the sea scrolls or whatever, with possibly the writings of Enoch on them. Now Enoch, what we know about Enoch at the time is that he walked with God and then he was no more. Enoch is one out of only two who God had just taken up according to the ancient texts of the scriptures. So Enoch was walking one day and then God took him. There was no death. There was no passing away of the flesh. God just took them. Just two. There's Enoch, and then the other one, and the name escapes me, but we will get there later on when we get to that place. But Enoch is important because Enoch writes a very mystical, according to what's found of Enoch, it's a very mystical interpretation of all the stuff that's happening, literal discussions with angels. There's a whole lot going on here in these ancient texts that is going on behind the scenes that we are not given an understanding, a complete whole understanding to, for a reason. A lot of it is hidden, a lot of it is mystical, a lot of it is mysteries. We know that at this time people were living 100, 500, 800, 1,000 years of age. We have what looks like angels interacting with humans. And again, when we're so close to the fall of Adam and Eve, of course, life looks different. And of course, Adam and Eve were also able to identify and see angels, right? They witnessed and saw the cherubim in front of the Garden of Eden with the flame going back and forth that was blocking the Garden of Eden from Adam and Eve. So things were different. The area was different at that time, that has since then been blocked from our sight. Now, I want to go on to Genesis 6 because this is where things get really weird and really wild, and this is where Enoch, the book of Enoch and understanding, comes into play. And it says this in Genesis 6, when humans began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. And then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. It goes on to say, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, And when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were heroes of old, men of renown. Now, the Nephilim are of great interest and conspiracy. The Nephilim is a lot of what came from the mystical and the mysticism side of the writings of Enoch. But we're not going to go into the Enoch because we're going to stick with the Canaan here. So, but just to give you an understanding that there's many different ways to look at this surrounding Genesis 6 and what it means when the sons of God had relationships with the daughters of men and born to them giants. On the conspiracy side, and I've taken that trip myself, and so I fully have understanding and awareness of the flesh side of what's being said here, rather not the spiritual side, but the flesh side, in that the physical angels were coming down, the fallen angels, the angels that gave up their place in heaven to come down. This is the conspiracy side, to come down and to have relationships with women, or the women of men. And in Genesis 6, one of the ideas in the conspiracy world is that then they had these children called the Nephilim, which were a mutant, if you will, a half angel, half fallen angel, and half human. And this is what created the giants in the ancient literature. And this is what a lot of the writings of Enoch is around. And from this, what's interesting is we do get a lot of tales, and we do get a lot of interesting concepts and ideas. We do get a lot of artistic, poetic things. Even to this day, when we read stories about the clash of the Titans and things of this nature, and these stories, these were made up of the principles of these mysteries. That's what forms these ideas. A lot of these stories that we see, superhumans, mutants, for example, Superman, and this and that, and the stories behind these, the battle of the gods, right? A lot of this is not just made up complete fantasy, but taken from the ancient texts of the Bible, because it's right there given to us. You have these superhumans on a conspiracy side. You have these superhumans as a result of angels of God who had relationships with women. And this is when we see around the time of the giants of old, and there was all kinds of evil arising as a result of that. And it gets us to where Noah is instructed to build an ark, because the whole earth is covered in violence as a result of what's taking place. Now, there's another explanation as well, and this does not necessarily have to do with the physical explanation of physical giants that lived in those days, of half angels and half human being, these hybrid super people. That could be a possibility, and I'm not going to rule that out, but I also want to discuss with you the spiritual implications, the moral implications of what could be saying. And it's backed up also by some ancient writers and understandings. I'm going to read one of them here from Ambrose of Milan. I'm going to go ahead and read what Ambrose of Milan had to say about this. And again, this is surrounding Genesis 6. Ambrose of Milan writes, "The giants, the Nephilim, were on the earth in those days. The author of the divine scripture does not mean that those giants must be considered, according to the tradition of poets, as sons of the earth, but asserts that those whom he defines with such a name, because of the extraordinary size of their body, were generated by angels and women. And let us see whether by any chance the men who only take care of their body and not of their soul are similar to the Nephilim." So, I'll continue here. Nephilim, and at the same time those giants who were not born of the earth, according to the tales of poets, and despised the authority of the gods by confiding in the hugeness of their bodies. Must we really consider as different from giants those men who, even though they are composed of body and soul, despise the most precious good of the soul, that is, the activity of the mind, and show themselves to be imitators of the flesh, as if confirming that they were heirs of their own mother's foolishness? They struggle in vain when they believe that they will conquer the heaven with their bold desires and their earthly activities. What's being said here and what's being described here is we can compare the Nephilim, okay, as a result of the sons of God and the daughters of men coming together, the Nephilim. We can compare this as And first of all, let me say that the other idea of the Nephilim, the giants, is also a result of the sons of God, meaning the sons of Seth, the line of Seth that we followed. Remember, the line of holiness, and the daughters of Cain. That's just another way of looking at this as a part of the sons of God and the daughters of man. All right. So in other words, what some are saying is that the scripture separates Cain's descendants into humanity, while Seth's descendants are godly. Okay. So what Ambrose of Milan is saying here is that the spiritual implications, and this falls into understanding narcissism, is that if we look at the spiritual side, sons of God, people who are of morality, when they come together and intertwine with these relationships with people they have no business being in relationships with, right? And can result in this unbalanced dynamic to where even the children suffer from being puffed up and feeling greater than God. And so we talk about giants as not just possibly not being embodied by a physical giant, but being like moral giant, a a giant in their own mind, a giant in their own spirit against holiness. And we see this giantness in narcissism. We see this giantness in the egotistical world that we live in. And this could be what they're talking about. This is one idea, one implication for us, one idea and concept we can gather from this. When you enter into relationships that you're not supposed to be in, the result is that giantness of the ego, that giantness of the spiritual. And there was another one that I wanted to read to you as well. This was all right. This is George Leo Haydock. So the sons of God, the descendants of Seth and Enos, are called the sons of God. So this is one idea as well as the sons of God as opposed to the angel idea. Whereas the ungodly race of Cain, okay, that's the ungodly race that they refer to then as mankind, who by their carnal affections lay groveling upon the earth, are called the children of men. The unhappy consequences of the former marrying with the latter ought to be a warning to Christians. So this is our warning, to be very circumspect in their marriages and not to suffer themselves to be determined in choice by their carnal passions, to the prejudice of virtue or religion. And he continues, see Saint Chrysostom, Psalm 22. Some copies of this Septuagint, having the angels of God, induce some of the ancients to suppose that these spiritual beings, to whom by another mistake they attributed a sort of aerial bodies, had commerced with women, as the pagans derived their heroes from a mortal and a god. But this notion, which is borrowed from the book of Enoch, is quite exploded. So in other words, he's trying to debunk the angelic view. But what he's saying is that this is a good indication of being wise to who you're choosing to be a partner in your life, because there are consequences when you are coming together with somebody who is not of the same moral understanding as you are. And this is something that we struggle with. You and I both, we always have, because our carnal passions take over when we are in this world. Our carnal passions kind of lead and have led us astray into relationships. And again, I've said this before, narcissistic abuse is a result of being with people you have no business being with, doing things you have no business doing, and going places you have no business going. This echoes that, what George Leo Haydock, and we see this as a result, we see this as a part in Genesis 6. Right here, we see people going and being with people they have no business being with, doing things they have no business doing, going places they have no business going. Whether you want to lean towards the side of these are actual angels who have chosen to give up their state with God and come down into humanity, or it's the sons of Seth, who was the chosen one to replace Abel instead of Abel. Either way you look at it, the fact of the matter is they chose to give up their their state of being and who they are, their path of life. They chose to give that up to intertwine and find themselves entangled in relationships with the daughters of men. The daughters of men is said that way because it is a clear distinction. So again, whether we're talking about actual angels or the sons of Seth, that doesn't matter. There's still a clear distinction between the morality of one and the morality of another. You have no business being a moral person, going and having children and finding yourself in the heat of passion with hardened criminals who have no morality whatsoever and have no heart for life in general, right? What is the draw there, except for the possibility of this uncontrollable passion that we must get control of, because the consequences of this passion are disastrous. That is the message behind this here, and the result of the Nephilim. And what it's telling us is that as a result of these passions, there are marriages and people coming together. The results of that are what we're seeing a lot of in today's world. The giants. The giants signify not physical giants in the world, but the giantness of the ego. And how many of you would say that we are entering into a day right now in which we see giant egos stomping all over the world? So we do see a return of Nephilim in that way. Nephilim are all over. They're all around us. They are the result of the passions of those who are godly and those who are completely separate but came together in entanglements and formed new generations, the generations of the Nephilim, the giants. And not only are we giants, but we are the mighty men of renown, right? The mighty people of renown in their narcissism, those who raise themselves up into seats of power in this world, those who raise themselves up as elected officials, right? We're seeing the Nephilim. We're seeing that spirit of Nephilim, the just the overbearingness, right? And so we're seeing the days of evil getting worse and worse and worse. This is how it was in the days of Noah, right before the flood and before Noah was instructed to build the ark so he can float on, right? So this is where we are at with this, right? So we can look at Nephilim as a great conspiracy, but we can also look at the spiritual implications of it, in which it resembles a rise of a giantness of ego, a giantness of corruption, a giantness as a result of the sons of God and the daughters of man. In other words, holiness and unholiness, right, coming together. And this is what we have seen throughout the ages, and it continues. And with that, I hope that you have gained some insight into where we're at right now, and I'm looking forward to continuing on. We're going to follow more into the line of holiness after Noah, and after that ship sails from that time where God does destroy everything. We're going to talk about that in next week's Royal We Fellowship, and I want you to have a blessed weekend. I'm glad that you're here with me, and we'll be back. Be sure to like this and be sure you're subscribed, and I'm going to do my best behind the scenes to make sure notifications are sent out to everybody. And we'll be back next Saturday morning at 9 o'clock a.m. Central Standard Time right here on Royal We Fellowship. Goodbye, everybody.